All protocols observed. Only to say a hearty good morning to Madam President Simon. I could definitely attest to her leadership and professionalism. As she leaked out, we did work together on a very interesting project in 2010 when she started her work in the region. And of course, we have been able to remain friends since then. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good morning. As professionals in our field, we must be foremost in our minds is the recognition that in a world full of complexities and challenges, being a passive observer is not an option. Instead, we have responsibilities that come with the expertise that we are blessed with. This mindset underscores the importance of active participation, engagement, and a sense of duty to make a difference in shaping a better world. It's about leveraging our power and influence to create a meaningful impact and to drive positive change. The responsibility we hold as catalysts for change transcends our respective fields. By sharing knowledge and empowering others, we can inspire collective action. I share with you words that I hold close to my heart. If it is going to be, it is up to me. I started my presentation today with this statement because I am one that feels strongly about the role of a professional in a developing world. The reality for most of us in this room is that the state has played a significant role in all of our education. Some of us were scholarship winners, some of us just went to high school, and at all different levels. I know in Trinidad and Tobago, we all go to university relatively free, and a lot so similar to a number of other Caribbean countries. And when the state pays, what does that mean? It means that scarce resources, which could have been used for something else, was used to facilitate our education and our growth and development. And when you dig even deeper, you realize that there are poor people who pay taxes, who are really the ones who have funded or contributed in funding our education. It is therefore critical for the growth and development of a society for us as beneficiaries to find a way to give back to the society that has paved their path and find a way to stand up as independent voices on what is right and what is wrong in this society. The reality is, in our society, priorities as we know it are changing, and rightly so. Everything is changing. I came face to face with that change just a few days ago. When I was studying, and I see Judy in the room, yes? When I was studying and I returned to Trinidad in 1984, I hope I'm not giving away my age, immediately after my graduation, my goal was to come back and to contribute to the development of my country, which at the time was a mere 22 years old. And not only me, but a number of graduates at that time had the same goal. But recently I had lunch with a number of university students in DC over the Thanksgiving weekend, and not one person expressed a similar goal. Somewhere along the lines, over the last 40 years, we have lost that drive to come back home and give back. And as we move forward, the rekindling of that nationalistic drive and the attractiveness of our country to the young professional is something that we need to rekindle and restore. I suppose by now you realize that I have digressed. A trait which I admittedly developed recently whilst pursuing another profession which some of you might be aware of. And I admit that I might digress occasionally during this address. But I felt that it is important to put my speech into context as I am speaking with a group of highly professional people this morning. My address will speak to climate change in the region, financing the resilience infrastructure, and the role of insurance. The bad news is that when you put a mic in front of a past or present politician, speech, you go straight into your break, so I'm sure that there will be some time that you will be able to get back. As I move back on script, I take the opportunity to express how deeply honored I am to be here delivering this address amidst professionals dedicated to shaping a sustainable future. I applaud the Caribbean Actuarial Association for coordinating this dialogue, as such forums are invaluable for bringing together diverse expertise and perspectives to tackle shared challenges. The opportunities to collaborate and exchange ideas and explore innovative solutions is critical, especially when it comes to addressing complex issues like sustainability and climate resilience. Let me take the opportunity now to say, may your discussions over the next 2 days yield successful and fruitful outcome. In acknowledging our collective responsibility as professionals, let's confront the stark reality we face today with some facts and some figures. The perfect storm of global conflicts, natural disasters, and the relentless impact of climate change has definitely hit our shores with increasing focus. In the Latin America and Caribbean region alone, the toll of natural disasters has affected millions. Between 2000 and 2019, the Latin America and Caribbean region suffered 1,205 natural disasters, affecting more than 150 million people. In the Caribbean alone, as a recent IMF report would have stated, and I quoted, natural disasters occur more frequently and cost more on average in the Caribbean than anywhere else in the world. And this is not me saying that, it is an IMF report. Since 1950, roughly 2/3 of the disasters to hit small countries have occurred in the Caribbean region, inflicting a loss of over 250,000 lives and affecting over 24 million persons through injury, loss of homes, and livelihood. The economic upheaval caused by these calamities is indeed astonishing, reaching far beyond immediate damages. The Caribbean suffers approximately $12.5 billion in economic losses from natural hazards every year, according to the recent UN data. We have witnessed entire economies losing larger than their entire GDP. This, of course, painted a dire picture of the challenges we confront. For example, Dominica lost 226% of its GDP when hit by Hurricane Maria in 2017. 200% of GDP was lost when Hurricane Ivan hit in 2004 in Grenada. Hurricane Dorian plummeted Grand Bahamas Islands for 48 long hours, causing damages equivalent to a quarter of the country's GDP. The IMF estimates that the economic impact of hurricanes in the Caribbean could be as high as 5.7% of GDP on average, and that this figure will increase to 22 to 77% by the year 2100 under global warming scenarios of high CO2 concentrations and an increasing warmer world. We are seeing now what is happening to the people of Tuvalu and the tribes of the coast of Panama. If you didn't read it, I refer to you a recent article in yesterday's Express newspaper, which gives more detail on the latest developments as it relates to coastal land space erosion and its effect in the Caribbean region and around the world. The sobering predictions of Georgetown in Guyana and Nassau, Bahamas, being underwater as early as 2030, based on some predictions, highlight the harsh reality that climate change is not a distant theory, but an imminent threat, particularly for those of us residing in small islands or low-lying areas. Our very survival hinges on our ability to navigate the delicate balance between adaptation and mitigation measures. In a world of scarce resources, how do we strike the balance between adaptive measures, which are the initiatives that will ensure our ability to survive and strive in this world, and mitigative measures, which are initiatives which allow us to play our part in reducing carbon emissions and to try to slow or delay the change. At the crux of this balancing act lies resilience, an indispensable investment. Building resilient infrastructure is not merely an expense, but it is a lifeline. However, the cost is staggering, estimated in billions. And this expense comes at a time when our existing infrastructure in the region, I dare say, put down during the time when we were part of an empire, is dated and now under threat of dilapidation and disrepair, compounded, of course, by the effects of climate. For those of you from Trinidad, we all experience the flooding when it rains. We are also aware that we continue to struggle with leaking water infrastructure, which prevents us from achieving our desired goal of water for all, despite our abundant supply and production levels. Of course, for those of you in Trinidad, you will know that I will stop here on that particular topic, as I could speak on and on and on about it. However, I will only say that Trinidad is not a water scarce country, unlike other countries in the region, where that issue is going to be a problem in a few years as a result of rising sea levels and the salt water getting into the aquifers. But as I said, I will not want to speak about that. That's another topic. The Caribbean Country Department of the IDB estimates that it will cost $19.6 billion in investment to achieve the SDG infrastructure goals by the year 2030 for the 6 Caribbean countries which are the IDB member states. And this does not include the money for digital transformation required for us to keep up with the advancements of the new world. Yet, the cost of inaction looms larger, surpassing the expenditure required for resilient building, which will reach $22 billion annually by 2050 and double that by the year 2100. I want you to understand those statistics. So we have done a calculation at the IDB on just the 6 countries that makes up our region, this part of who are members. And they estimate $19.6 billion to meet the SDG goals. However, if you do nothing and you do not spend the $19 billion, by 2050, you will be spending or required to spend $22 billion annually. And if you continue to do nothing, by the year 2100, you will now be spending twice times that figure annually. That is the kind of money, and that's what it is that you are talking about. In another estimate done by the IDB, the infrastructure and social spending needed to meet climate change goals in the Latin American Caribbean region is between 17 to 19% of GDP. This is now the figures for the whole region. And we are talking about 470 billion, and by the way, every time I speak these numbers, it's US dollars, to 1.3 trillion in 2030. The numbers for the Caribbean region is a subset of that. Now, while I was preparing this speech, someone tells me, you're putting too much of figures. You're giving these people too much of figures. You will lose the message. I had to remind them that I am dealing with math geniuses, and they love figures. So I apologize. If you find you are getting figures, it's because I choose to want to make sure that you understand the figures and the magnitude of the problem. The harsh irony of all of these costs that the region must bear is that the Caribbean contribution of global CO2 emissions is a mere 0.3%. Climate change is a problem which we did not create. Climate change is a problem which we did not create, yet we bear the burden of the repercussions. Mia Mottley and a number of Caribbean country leaders have been strong in their advocacy of the polluter pay principle, which simply means that those that created the problem should take the responsibility for fixing the problem. Whether we like it or not, the issue of climate is front and center. The impetus for immediate action has never been more critical. We are no longer running a marathon. This demands a sprint. We must make strategic interventions now to prevent further regression of our region. But the questions persist. And I will take a little sip of water on this. But the question persists. How do we finance the resilience endeavors in nations already constrained by fiscal limitations and escalating debt? Some of the countries in the region are some of the most indebted countries in the world, with debts to GDP levels way over 100%. And there are few countries around with the more acceptable 60% level. A recent publication by the IDB advised that the ideal figure to be able to deal with adequately with external shocks that are coming should be a figure closer to 40–45%. One thing I have learned from my time as a minister and as a banker is that money is a critical ingredient in achieving any goal. In the words of the mighty Sparrow, which some of you will know, and he said, you know, you can't make love without money. Our battle cry, our battle against climate change necessitates accessible and affordable financing. We have already estimated, we have already established that the cost is too great of a burden on governments. We really can't put any more, they can't take any more debt on their books. Active participation of both local and international private sectors and multilateral development banks is a must in building resilience and fostering sustainable development. Funding needs to come from the multilateral development banks at concessionary rates. Their role outside of providing funding is also providing the knowledge and technical support that the region needs to channel the funds where they are needed. The reality is, for a number of our countries in our region, if tomorrow morning they were given all the funds mentioned above, the execution capacity and to use these money effectively needs to be improved. One just needs to look at our own execution capacity in Trinidad and the low level of our execution in the public sector investment program as an example. And I dare say that in Trinidad, we are a lot better than a number of the other countries. However, once again, capacity building and the deficiencies and solutions surrounding execution is a conversation for another address. Added to the list of possible places to get help, we also have the private sector, the oil and gas companies, the climate change funds, like the Green Fund, and the recently one to be established, the Loss and Damage Fund, governments across the world who are the top CO2 emissions globally. All are avenues to help us deal with the climate crisis individually and collectively. A view commonly held by a lot of us is that one of the real roles of the state lies in the creation of an enabling environment that facilitates the flow of funds into a country. This environment should encourage and support investment from both local and international sources. It involves regulatory frameworks, policies, and infrastructure that promote the ease of doing business, reduce barriers to investment, and ensure financial stability. Two pillars in this enabling environment are the commercial banking industry and the insurance industry. By offering financing options and investment opportunities, commercial banks become key conduits for directing funds into projects that enhance resilience and sustainability. Their involvement can catalyze private sector investment initiatives aimed at mitigating climate-induced risk. Simultaneously, the insurance industry can incentivize resilience by recognizing and rewarding investments in risk mitigation and climate resilience. Their involvement not only protects assets, but also encourages individuals, businesses, and government to adopt measures that enhance resilience against climate-related challenges. This collaborative approach, supported by the active involvement of the private sector, MDBs, commercial banks, and insurance companies, not only ensures a sustainable flow of funds into the country, but also lays the groundwork for fostering resilience, mitigating risk, and achieving long-term sustainability. The climate change issue, however, extends beyond accessible and affordable financing. Whilst the linchpin is achieving these goals, whilst it is the linchpin in achieving these goals, it represents just the tip of the iceberg. Below the surface, what most people do not see is the complex insurance conundrum posed by climate change. The confluence of internal and external factors exerting pressure on the region's insurance industry paints a complex picture. Internally, the impact of new legislations, such as IFRS 17, adds significant challenges throughout the industry. Compliance with these stringent yet necessary regulations requires significant adjustment in risk assessment, financial reporting, and operational strategies. Additionally, the difficulty in paying premiums using foreign exchange add another layer of complexity, potentially deterring reinsurers from engaging more deeply in our markets. Externally, rising interest rates play a pivotal role in reshaping investment preferences. Reinsurers seeking stability and lower risk are drawn to markets perceived as less volatile. Simultaneously, the escalating risk stemming from climate change presents a daunting challenge. You see, climate change presents a unique risk profile, unlike any seen before. It challenges the very essence of insurance, and it defies the steady state risk insurance, having traditionally dealt with. Climate change presents an uninsurable dilemma. As risks rise over time and interconnect with other hazards, it renders certain events uninsurable under the current framework. The traditional historic database actuarial calculations struggle to encompass the rising certainty of increasing risk. Of increasing risk, droughts and floods occurring simultaneously. Wetter, wet seasons, and drier, dry seasons. Losses in the agriculture production as a result of flooding, immediately resulting in losses in the same sector as a result of droughts. Reinsurers with the option to deploy their capital in more secure environments might hesitate to commit to regions facing amplified climate-related uncertainties, especially small ones. But this could have sustainable economic and investment impact in our region. Financiers and investors once insured assets. It is critical to remember, and I remember my time as a banker in Trinidad and Tobago, over 80% of the loans from banks and other lending institutions are supported by insurance products. Navigating these challenges necessitates a multifaceted strategy, one that acknowledges the gravity of both internal and external pressures while seeking variable solutions to mitigate their impact. Internally, adapting to regulatory changes in IFRS 17 demands collaboration and innovation within the industry. Insurers and reinsurers must work together to streamline compliance processes, ensuring that the transaction does not compromise financial stability or operational efficiency. Addressing concerns around the foreign exchange-related premium payments may involve exploring alternative payment mechanisms or creating incentives to offset potential deterrents for reinsurers. As insurers become progressively wary of increasing certainties of rising risk, the insurance landscape is shifting. It is my concerted view that it is only a matter of time before reinsurers conduct an evaluation of our region and we experience a mass exodus of reinsurers who have already started to leave other climate-affected areas around the world. This, of course, will put our economic stability at risk. Allow me to digress briefly again. We have actually been here before in the Caribbean. In a study conducted by the Atlantic Council in Washington, published in 2022, it highlights that this region has suffered the biggest decline of correspondent banking of any region in the world due to the perceived risk associated with anti-money laundering fines. We have seen the fallout of international banks withdrew from this vital service, disrupting financial stability in our region. If we do not pivot, we risk suffering like what has happened in the correspondent banking industry, the largest decline in insurers of any region globally. You see, when I was the treasurer of Republic Bank a little earlier in my career, I witnessed the active pursuit of correspondent banking relationships by international institutions. They were constantly pounding on my doors in the early 2000s, wanting our business. However, a paradigm shift occurred when the perceived risk of facing substantial fines made that business unattractive. And I see my friend Steve Badeshi in the room from Citibank. If every time you want to find out a little bit more about that, please feel free to talk to him. When correspondent banks began to leave, they didn't do so because our markets were no longer profitable. It was because when they weighed the profits from the small volumes of business, albeit still profits, in the region, against the risk of the potential loss, albeit perceived, it was too high, and the maths didn't work out, and they left. Although there might have been other countries where the risk might have been higher, the volumes of business also in those countries were also higher, making it worth their while. This is a problem that I was dealing with in 2008 when I was the president of the Caribbean Association of Indigenous Banks. We are still today trying to find solutions to this problem now that correspondent banks have all left. And I participated just 1 month ago in a conference dealing with this in 2023 at the IDB and this problem. And while the perceived risk is not truly reflective of the actual risk, the Caribbean region, and in the Caribbean region, the reality is that risk is at the core of the problem. At the end of the day, we were part of Latin America and the Caribbean. And a lot of people, although, for example, when you talk about anti-money laundering and those effects, the countries with some of those, and I hope there are none of these countries, were Mexico, Colombia, and those countries in our region. But these countries are big countries. At the end of the day, when they do an evaluation in the Latin America and the Caribbean region, you know what? Although we never got much fines here in the Caribbean, but our volumes were so small and the perceived risk was large, right, that they stayed in Mexico or spent a lot of time wanting to stay in Mexico because of the large amount of premiums, and the risk was even higher than Mexico than by us. So that is the calculation that has happened, and that is the calculation that has resulted in a number of them leaving, and they have never returned. It is important, therefore, that we learn from the past. We cannot afford to sit in complacency and wait for this to happen. The challenges posed by these external and internal facts are formidable, but it is not insurmountable. I believe by adopting a strategic, collaborative, and forward-thinking approach, the region's insurance industry can navigate these complexities, potentially reshaping the narrative to one of resilience, adaptation, and renewed attractiveness for reinsurers. We must forge a new path, one built on a nuanced approach that intertwines the efforts of government, private sector, insurance, banking, and international institutions. At the heart of this solution is a paradigm shift. Recognition that not all risks are created equally, and which makes the distinction between regional and idiosyncratic risk. In other words, there is an underlying risk, which is the risk associated with global exogenous factors, location, and our environment. And then there's the actual risk of the building that requires insurance coverage. What do we know? We know that the cost of insurance is getting to be astronomically high, due in part to the risk of the region and the cost of doing business in the region. We are also painfully aware that we do not contribute to certain elements of that risk. As I said before, we are sitting ducks. And as one prime minister put it in the region, we are the rubbish bins. And these risks are the ones which insurance companies are at pains to cover. One remedy lies in a symbiotic partnership grounded in the polluter pay principle, where the burden is not placed on the state, but instead the responsibility is placed on the polluting agencies and governments. MDBs like IDB and the World Bank to stand as backstops for these regional risks, incentivizing insurers to cover the diverse idiosyncratic risk and by extension, reducing the cost to the end user. I will elaborate. Consider the imminent risk in sea levels. Over the course of the next 20 years, sea levels in our region will rise by 3/4 of a meter. That is a real problem for many of the low-lying coral islands. Insurers face a daunting task of providing coverage to properties that might soon be underwater. Here, the agencies can step in to cover the macro-regional climate flooded-related risk as an incentive for the insurance companies to embrace the micro and non-flood risk. Because, as I have said before, and I will say again, the rising sea levels are a phenomenon that we are victims of, caused by other countries and industries. But an appropriate model needs to be developed and implemented to share the responsibility for these risks, to allow for the business environment in the Caribbean to continue to be attractive and to prevent the private insurance companies and other private sector individuals from simply exiting the region. Left to market forces, what will happen in a few years is that our hotels on the seafront will be faced with the daunting choice of having no insurance at all or paying exorbitant costs for those insurance, both relatively unacceptable solutions. This approach, however, necessitates long-term sustainability. The burden of maintaining insurability cannot definitely rest solely on the governments already grappling with economic challenges, even with the interplay between the state, private sector, and multilateral development banks. So how do we proceed? What is the role of each group in this new paradigm? Starting with the private sector, their involvement is critical in driving economic growth and fortifying resilience, creating an enabling environment for businesses, both locally and internationally, is key. This involves streamlining regulations, improving infrastructure, and fostering a business-friendly atmosphere that reduces the perceived risk of investment. By doing so, the private sector can be incentivized to invest in projects aimed at bolstering resilience against climate-induced risks, which is perhaps the best long-run solution. Simultaneously, multilateral development banks like the IDB and the World Bank play a pivotal role in providing accessible and affordable financing. We must build resilience fortified by initiatives like the Bridgetown Initiative, where multilateral development banks offer cheaper, long-term financing to bolster our resilience against climate-induced risk. Concessionary resources offered by these institutions can be instruments in funding resilience-building initiatives. These funds, with their favorable terms and longer tenor, can facilitate the implementation of projects that might otherwise face financial barriers. Collaboration between the MDBs and local government is critical to ensure these funds are channeled effectively to initiatives that enhance resilience. In tandem with these effects, insurance companies and the commercial banking sector serves as mobilizers of savings and risk management. They play a critical role in incentivizing resilience investments through tailored insurance products and risk-sharing mechanisms. Collaborations with governments and businesses, insurance companies can design innovative solutions that mitigate risk, thereby encouraging more significant investment in projects aimed at strengthening resilience. As government invests in resilience, however, building seawalls or other protective measures, insurers should reward these initiatives with reduced premiums. Not only does this acknowledge proactive measures against climate-induced risk, but it also encourages future investment in safeguarding communities and assets against climate-induced risk. This approach aligns incentives between the public and the private sector. It creates a shared interest in mitigating risk and reinforces the idea that investment in resilience are mutually beneficial. Governments are encouraged to allocate resources towards protective measures, knowing that these actions will be recognized financially and financially rewarded by reduced insurance costs. This method forms a positive feedback loop where investment in resilience is not only seen as a necessity, but also as a prudent financial decision benefiting both the insurers and the insured. Actuaries, your role in this paradigm shift is also pivotal. In small markets like ours, the reality is that current practices too often rely on broad brush assessments, utilizing outdated actuarial books and public databases that provides generalized information about risk. However, these approaches might not capture the nuanced details necessary to truly understand and differentiate between resilience and vulnerable structures or investments. Failing to adapt and employ granular risk assessment techniques may indeed lead insurers to overlook or undervalue resilience investments and place undue burdens on different stakeholders to pay the costs. This oversight could potentially lead them to reconsider their participation in the market or even departing from the region altogether. Granularity in risk assessment is pivotal for insurers in effectively recognizing and rewarding investments in resilience. Moving beyond these blanket assessments, insurers need to adopt more granular and sophisticated methodology in insuring risk. Insurers that integrate granularity risk information into their assessment can provide tailored coverage and offer reduced premiums to entities that have invested in effective risk mitigation strategies. This involves delving into details, localized data, and maybe also recognizing data that offers a more comprehensive understanding of specific risk faced by properties, infrastructure, and communities. This also involves investing in data and actuarial expertise. Actuaries, you see, play a pivotal role in evaluating risk and determining the appropriate pricing and coverage strategies. Investing in talent and expertise in this domain allows insurers to make informed decisions, particularly when dealing with complex and evolving risk associated with climate change. And I digress for the last time when I say I want to also congratulate you all and the team for bringing together the young people from the region and the university to come and experience, and it's important that we do share with them because they are our future, and we need for them to participate and understand the issues because the world ahead is really theirs. The Caribbean Actuarial Association is at the forefront of climate change adaptation. Your expertise, honed by experiencing these challenges firsthand, positions you as global experts. It is not just about our region. The world requires your insight. This insight, anchored in your unique experience, elevates the role of Caribbean actuaries as global pioneers. Your expertise holds the key to navigating this evolving landscape. By championing granularity, by advocating for differentiation, by spearheading conversations around resilience-based financing, and by championing for the polluter pay principle and its effect on insurance, you position yourself not just as regional experts, but as global leaders shaping a sustainable future. The path ahead, as you have realized, is not without its challenges. But our collective resource, our capacity for innovation, and our collaborative spirit, paves the way for a sustainable future. Let us, as professionals, as leaders, as pioneers, stand united in shaping a resilient and sustainable future for generations to come. Always remembering these words: if it is going to be, it is up to me. I thank you.